I'm Chris Bussing. Welcome to my channel. This is the place where you come to start and grow your tech sales career. We've got an incredible guest today, Josh Roth. He's made over 100,000 cold calls. Supposedly, he's never missed his quota. That's like getting a perfect score on the SAT. It's unheard of. He's been a sales leader for 9 years, maybe more. Keep me honest, Josh. And he's helped SDRs and AEs get promoted. I'm sure some of you out there are looking to get promoted. If you are, this conversation's for you. And he's a seasoned sales leader that really has figured out the answers to the test when it comes to SaaS sales growth. We're going to have an amazing conversation today. Make sure to pay close attention and take thorough notes and share this conversation with people who you think could benefit from the message. Josh, thank you so much for being here. Excited to dive in.
I'm pumped. Let's do it.
Let's do it. So what do you love about this sales career path?
I think first and foremost, the opportunity to help people. I think that there's, helping people grow their careers, helping customers make their teams more efficient, get promoted, get raises themselves. Like that's what I love about being in sales and, connecting through community and an opportunity to meet new people that really you probably wouldn't have had a chance to meet otherwise.
It seems like you've got a soft spot for SDRs, and a lot of our audience is aspiring SDRs or SDRs who want to crush lead gen and outbounding and get promoted to AE. How did you end up falling in love with SDRs? And tell us the origin story of SDR Defenders.
Yeah. So, I've done the job, I think is really where, I have a soft spot. Like I was the person that was making 120 calls every single day for, a year. And then when I toned it down a little bit, it was like 70 calls every single day for, probably another 2 years. So I know what it's like to build a book with absolutely nothing coming in and all of your sales going outbound. It's a really tough job. It's a thankless job. And you deal with a lot more rejection than you do anything else. So it's a spot that I just genuinely love. And SDR Defenders is a fun story. So Kyle Coleman, shout out Kyle Coleman, made a post, I think 5 years ago at this point on LinkedIn. And I don't even remember who, but someone in the comments came through and said, SDRs should stay in their lane. And Kyle shot me a text and was like, hey, can you come and help me defend SDRs in this post? Because SDRs have such an important job beyond just making calls and making emails. So that was kind of the initial start. He and I kind of batted around a few ideas around what we could do to support SDRs. Eventually we came to a community. We teamed up with Nikki and Tom and Nisha, and we really built it out to be a place where early career salespeople could come, learn, be enabled, grow, and ask any questions that they want.
And yes, shout out to Kyle Coleman, one of the best interview conversations we've had. And it's such a privilege to have one of his friends and peers to join us today. And the SDR role will always have a special place in my heart. It's where I cut my teeth. I was at Oracle, and I feel like I developed a fundamental skill set, and I've taken those skills with me. Can you instill some pride in us SDRs out there and why it's actually a foundational role that it's to what you alluded to earlier, more than just sending out emails and making calls?
Ooh, 100%. I look at the SDR role as the pipeline for the organization from a talent perspective and a sales perspective. And, SDRs in my career as an SDR leader or leading teams that have SDRs as a part of it, SDRs have gone to all sorts of departments. When I was at the Mets, we had an SDR go to the scouting team, the player operations team. I've seen SDRs in SaaS sales go to go on to be CROs, solutions engineers, account managers, CSMs, product team, engineering team, AEs. I mean, again, that is where your talent funnel comes from. And one of the big things that I think about SDRs and why I think that role is so critical is if you don't have an understanding of how sales works, it's really hard for you to build a perspective on how to build a company. And so if you're going to be a founder without any sales experience, having any perspective in terms of how go-to-market works is going to be really challenging for you if you haven't dealt with that rejection, if you haven't dealt with that adversity, if you haven't had someone, hang up on you or cuss at you on the phone or ask you how you got their number. that go-to-market motion becomes so much more challenging when you don't have that experience firsthand. And so to me, SDRs are much more than just, let me make a bunch of calls and let me, book a couple of meetings. Like, that's where people build perspectives on industries, on technology stacks, on how to sell, how to market themselves, and I think most importantly, how to tell a story. And I
Mm.
think ultimately, what you learn in that SDR role better than anywhere else is how to tell a story. And for me, making those 120 cold calls a day, like, I didn't do that thinking, oh, let me be the best storyteller. I did it because I felt that I was not a good salesperson. And so I was going to need to make 40 more calls every single day than everybody else on the team if I had a chance to hit my number and surpass those on the leaderboard ahead of me. But what it turned into was that I became a really good storyteller. I was able to recall things that other customers had told me, share that with prospective customers, and that's really what has helped me grow in my career. And I really use that as my foundation.
Thank you for infusing meaning into what can seem like a sweatshop, thankless job. And that meaning for the folks out there might just be the motivation to push through, having a long-term perspective in mind that they are developing critical skill sets and perspective. Now, what seems unexpected is that making all those dials and playing the numbers game eventually led you to become an incredible storyteller. And you started to allude to the fact that you could pull out stories at the right times for relevant customers based on like similar customers that you might have helped. Can you speak a little bit more to what it takes to be a good storyteller in the context of sales?
It's a great question. I think for me, there's a lot of different factors. The one that kind of pops out is natural curiosity. I think sometimes there's this feeling about sales that you need to sell the right feature at the right time, and you're waiting in discovery for that customer to share that one thing that's going to give you an opening. Oh, this feature is going to solve everything for you.
Yeah.
And I think for me, like, the part about selling that I really enjoy is actually like understanding what is the strategy beyond the feature that isn't doing it for the customer. Like, why are they there from a strategic perspective? Like, what is the company focusing on at the highest levels that is driving the need for that? And sometimes, and for public companies, you can actually read about this or learn about this in a company's quarterly or yearly earnings reports. And I like to hear the way that, whether it's the CEO or the CFO or whoever is actually sharing these earnings and some of the different headwinds or tailwinds that they're kind of dealing with. That oftentimes dovetails into why specifically this one feature is really, really important for the organization, because largely people don't buy software because they need a feature or they need something like that. It's actually part of a larger strategic implementation that's driven by a need for typically shareholder value.
I had a business value architect that I worked with at Oracle that said things ultimately come down to not the bells and whistles, but take the tech out of tech. It's reducing cost, reducing risk, saving time, and driving top line revenue. I just want you to riff off that. Are we heading in the right direction there when we think about why customers buy? And feel free to expand upon it.
No, that's spot on. So when I was at WalkMe, our CEO, Shane Orlick, who's an absolute legend, he actually said almost the exact same thing. He said, when people sell to me, as the CRO,
Yeah.
what I think about is, if you're going to help me generate more revenue, that's 10 times more important to me. If you're going to help me keep the revenue the same but trim my costs, that's 5 times as important to me. And if you're going to help me mitigate my risk and keep everything else the same, that's going to give you 1.25x importance. And so, again, that's the CRO, not the CEO. But one of the things that I thought about is, like, when he shared that each person, each economic buyer, decision maker, however you want to frame it, is going to have their own set of criteria as to what's important to them, and understanding what's important and why it's important to them. And then again, it kind of goes back to that storytelling, being able to craft the specific story or recall a success story that you've had is critical in terms of getting that person's attention, again, even for like 7 to 10 seconds, because typically buyers have short attention spans, and understanding how to say it is a lot more important than necessarily like exactly what to say.
Yeah, you make me think also of the importance of tone, which is much more subtle, like being confident. And I think of Aaron Ross, who wrote Predictable Revenue. And didn't
Yep.
he mention like acting like you're asking for directions, or not even acting, but having a tone of someone either asking for directions and then giving directions? I just wanted to nerd out briefly on tone, and we don't have to overanalyze it, but just curious to get your thoughts on that, kind of the what we're sub communicating behind the words.
Boy, you are asking such awesome questions. It's like it's hard for me to actually like keep that tone consistent. You know, when I was you know, my role was an inside sales rep, but I consider myself an SDR given the volume of activity I had. Um,
Yes.
I had what my manager very lovingly put it as shot out of a cannon energy, where you know
You
someone
too,
would
by the way. Hey, quick thing at Google Cloud, when I was an inside seller, my manager called me lightning in a bottle. I took it as a compliment, but I also was like, yeah, I know I'm intense. So anyways, I feel like we're cut from a similar cloth.
100%. Like I was the Energizer bunny to a couple of my
Yes.
colleagues. Like it's, you know, and I think
Yes.
I'm sure like you'll probably resonate with this. Like you pick up the phone, someone answers, and you're like, "Hey, how's it going?"
Hey,
And
how's
the
it going? I
person,
sound like a cartoon character.
yeah, and the person on the other end's like, "Whoa,"
Yeah, yeah.
like you're really loud, and it's hard because as I've you know kind of gained experience, I haven't necessarily lost that energy, and so understanding the ways and the how behind where to put my energy and how to express that is
Ooh.
something that I've really worked hard on in my career to not only control but actually use to my advantage where you know, a lot of people on, I'm sure there's specific people who talk a lot about this, but maybe Jen Allen is one of the people that talks a lot about it. The tonality and matching the tone of your prospective customer is really important. Like sometimes you'll get people that are a little bit more animated. Like, you know, for me, if I'm like walking my dogs and I get a cold call, I'm much more likely to take the call and be more receptive to it and actually have a conversation with the person rather than if someone catches me in like a 2 minute block where I'm like, filling up my water in between meetings, right? And so mirroring that tone is really important, and also understanding um, the ways that you can bring out and kind of dig into the right areas without being overbearing in the sales process is really critical because ultimately people are going to buy differently. Some people are going to be a little bit more energetic. They're going to want to dig in. Other people are going to be more cautious and conservative, right? You know, I think that the old saying goes like, no one ever gets fired for not buying software, right? And so recognizing that you present a somewhat natural risk for somebody and helping them understand specifically not only how it will help them, but going through a buying cycle that emotionally is is appropriate for that person.
Mm. It's such a strength that we're passionate people, and that can translate to the customer and rub off on them and get them excited. But I will say, back to my Oracle days and Google days too, and now I'm at a startup. That's been a fun journey. I've had to manage my passion and turn it on at the right times and kind of turn it off. And I just remember when I was, after getting promoted from SDR to inside seller at Oracle, I was working with Citizens Bank. That's a big company, and I was
It
local in
is.
Boston. And there was this like VP that literally, I swear, maybe he didn't say it exactly, was like, settle down, kid. I was so excited. And he was like this older VP that was so chill. And I realized the importance of meeting people where they're at. Do you have any other advice on how to, for someone like me, how someone can manage that passion and how to like mindfully use it at the right times and adapt?
So it's another boy. You're asking really great questions that it feels like you're kind of getting into the weeds, which is really fun. It's
Okay.
nice to like talk tactics. Um, there's a few things that I did to try to control that passion and control the energy. The first is going on site with customers because when you're in person and able to read the body language, see what their office looks like, get a sense for just like I know it sounds a little weird, but like the vibe of the office. That's really helpful because you then
Yeah.
understand how you can properly fit into that office. Yeah, I remember there was a time I went into an investment bank in New York. You know, they had CNBC on every channel. Everybody was in suits. They were really serious. Luckily, I'd worn a suit that day. And I remember the person that I was selling to was very serious. There was very little about anything other than the numbers. What's it going to drive? What's
Yeah.
my ROI going to be? How fast can I expect it? And so for me, being able to see that, and this sounds a little silly, but like recognizing, hey, like if CNBC is on every screen, right? Like they're going to be so not only focused but aware, I think is the better word. And so for me, I figured that this person wasn't going to want to like kind of like rib with me, or kind of like I didn't feel that rapport was going to be as critical. It was going to be about the numbers, and this person was going to make a numbers decision. And so that's going to be a very different atmosphere than a company where they're in kind of like t-shirts and jeans, and maybe that the office has like a bunch of bean bags. Again, like that's just going to be a different type of sale sometimes to a different person. So just being able to see that is helpful. And then also going to the person, you get energy out from that. You got to walk there, you got to take a train or a bus or a taxi or something. And that naturally kind of helped me get to an equilibrium of, hey, I am here for business. I'm not here to like talk to a screen. I need to observe, I need to be aware, and I need to mirror.
You're a sales leader, and I appreciate you being willing to get in the weeds with us and talk tactics. I'm asking very pointed questions, and these tactics are so useful. And what you've described, the way you engage with this person who is more serious and analytical, could make the difference for someone opening up an amazing opportunity or literally killing the opportunity right then and there, because people do buy from people they like, and they tend to like people who are similar. So you just remind me of someone who was a key account director on Uber at Google Cloud when I was interviewing from inside sales to field sales. I said, "What's your special sauce?" I didn't actually say it that way, but it's a little cheesy. And she said, "Be a chameleon." So I appreciate going in the weeds. And I have a lot more questions for you. So let's keep it flowing.
Love it.
A river doesn't cut through rocks due to its power. It's due to its persistence. I didn't quote that exactly right, but that seems to be a cornerstone to your success and a key mantra for you. Tell us, what does this mean?
So ultimately, it means that for me, it means that um, you're going to have success by being consistent. One of the things that I think is hardest for just human beings in general is consistency. I think it's one of the hardest human traits to have. And in sales, it's easier than you think to be great occasionally, and it is unbelievably challenging to be good consistently. And to me, that quote embodies consistency. Um, and ultimately, I think like if you think, I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and he was saying, oh, like this person's a top performer, and I asked why, and they said, well, they had a really good year. I said, okay, what are they doing though, day in and day out, that's helping them have that good a year? Like, did they just get lucky and the round robin gave them a amazing deal that they were able to close, or is their process really strong and better than their peers? And is that why? So for me, that quote kind of embodies consistency.
It's so important to, I say, be pleasantly persistent. I've seen deals that I lost like a year or more ago that I was able to win for the long term. And it really resonates what you said about consistently delivering, because there is something in me that I notice, like a resistance, something that will prevent me from wanting to continue to do the work. And it's like I have to push past that. And because I don't know, you alluded to some people, like some people maybe naturally struggling with the consistent success. Do you think there is some like internal resistance or something that prevents us from, that we have to like overcome to get there? I'm just kind of going off the cuff here. So I would love your thoughts on what might prevent us from the consistent success.
I think the answer is just naturally yes, right? I think humans just tend to have a tendency to not always aim higher. It takes a good combination of intrinsic and extrinsic motivations to get people to that standard. There was a rep that I worked with, and this person's superpower was they just worked harder than everybody else, and unsurprisingly, they didn't miss their quota for a long time, like a year and a half, 2 years. And, then they kind of let off the gas a little bit. And unsurprisingly, they missed a number and they missed a second. And, all the while I was having conversations with this person like, hey, like, you're not living up to your own standard here. Right. And I think ultimately being able to create both and ensure that you have both the intrinsic and extrinsic motivations is really important. Like for me, when I was at the Mets, and I'll clarify it, I've definitely missed my fair share of numbers, but I didn't at the Mets. That's the only place where
Okay. Yeah. See, I'm your hype man
perfect.
here. I'm like a marketing guy, and hey, keep me honest. So
No, it's all good. I was like, ooh, I've definitely missed numbers though.
yeah. Because it's like that's how you learn, though. It's like no one. Like I see Jamal Raymer, I had him on the channel, Mega Deal Secrets author. He closed $50 million deals at Oracle. He was fired for underperformance 2 years in a row, like 2 jobs in a row. And then he went on. So it's so encouraging to hear how we can fail forward. But thanks for keeping me honest on that.
No, it's all good. So when I was at, when I was at the Mets, I think one of the big, what, actually, can you remind me of the question? I want to make sure I'm answering it specifically.
Yeah, shoot, man. It's so fun.
Human tendencies.
Yes, and you said intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. It's like, how do we keep ourselves to keep pushing through? Because it's like our nature to get comfortable. You described that person, I'm just going to riff a little bit, who was hitting the numbers, but all of a sudden they got comfortable and they didn't. And it reminded me that with success in sales and life, the rent is always due.
Bingo.
Yeah, so anyways, back to you.
And for me, when I was at the Mets, there was always something to keep me going. Like it was either, someone who had been at the Mets longer was higher on the leaderboard, and I was going to, I was determined to catch them. And that always kind of was that like Twinkie for me. And then eventually I was kind of like, you know what? I don't know that I want to be in sports anymore. I don't know that I'm like super interested in this. And I lost that intrinsic motivation piece. And I kind of realized if I'm not going to be 100% in, like I need to go find something where I am going to be 100% in. And so I left and came into software. That's when I broke into tech sales. And I think ultimately not everyone is able to do that. Not everyone is able to kind of like think in that way. For me, I need that combination of both intrinsic and extrinsic motivation to keep me going. Because I'm either like a full speed ahead or a full stop person. And if I'm full speed ahead, you're going to get everything I have. But if I'm full stop, you're getting nothing. And I'm just going to sit on the couch and, watch football or something.
Man, we're so similar. It's like, and I think we both have an intrinsic motivation that takes hold of us where we just purely like from the inside, we're motivated to be great and do the best we can. But I've had times where that went away or I wasn't believing in something. And I could be stubborn. It's like, if I'm not fully bought in, I'm not going to put in the work. But when I am, watch out, it's dangerous. I don't know. This is so random, but I think of zodiac signs. I feel like I might have been talking to a girl about it on a date or something. As you remember, clearly I'm a 30-year-old single guy because I tried to book this interview with you on Valentine's Day. I don't think wifey, right, would have been happy about that.
All good. This is a really fun conversation. It's it's a good one. I think ultimately there's a lot of different uniqueness in sales because there's so many soft skills to measure. And one of the things that I think it just frustrates me about just like the industry and the way that salespeople are treated is there. And I'll pull from Simon Sinek here. There's 1,000,001 ways to measure performance. There's little to no ways to measure trust. And trust and the soft skills, especially in sales, is so critical because if you don't have that, people aren't going to want to buy. And I've seen circumstances where there are reps that work with customers, and the customer's like, yeah, I don't know that I want to buy from this person, and then the rep gets switched to a new rep, and then they do buy. And I've actually had the customer say like, thank you so much for switching salespeople because I don't think I would have bought with the other person. And to me, that's so critical, right? Because having the right salesperson with the right customer is something that is not often done, right? It's so easy to chop up territories and chop up segments, and I've done it before, right? Like I'll raise my hand to that. I've definitely done that. Ultimately, I think there eventually will be a better way to get the right AE on the right account, so
Yes.
that there's the best chance possible to win that deal.
I mean, how insightful is what you just shared? The reality is, like, it illustrates how important we are in the buying decision as the seller, being likable and connecting with the customer. And I recently had my boss in town, actually, it was on Tuesday, with one of our seasoned sellers, Ben. We just brought him over from a competitor. This guy has just been around working with the biggest companies out there. And he told me stories over lunch of a few times where he was traded out for another rep because the customer didn't like him, and that was required to close the deal. And then where he filled in for another rep where the customer didn't like that rep, and he came in to save the day. And so I only recently I'm 9 years in, right? I still have a lot to learn. And I did have a deal, like a monster deal, where I had a senior peer come in to work it with me. But it's so interesting that that's a real thing. To take someone out of a deal strategically and have someone plugged in. And in the case of Ben, what he did is he was literally pinging her on calls, telling her what to say, but she was like a better face representing the company. Is that, if you have any more thoughts to expand on that, but I just recently discovered this is a thing. It's like, it's brilliant.
I'll share two more. Like, I've been on both sides of it. I've been removed from sales processes where the customer didn't love me, and I've been added when they didn't love someone else. Like, I think most salespeople probably had like some sort of experience with this, but I'll share a really good example. So, former company I was at had a large RFP with a large publicly traded company, and we gave the RFP presentation, and we eventually won the business. And shortly after we won the business, we were hanging with our now customer. We were at dinner, and the person that was leading the RFP said, we knew 30 minutes into your RFP presentation that you were the right fit for us, because culturally it was just the right fit. We could like sense that everyone on the call was authentic. The account executive on the call was, he had a really good connection with the person leading the RFP. Obviously, they didn't know each other before, but they created that then.
Wow.
And that was something I kind of took and put in my back pocket of like just how critical it was that like it's not just something that any account executive can do, or any salesperson can do. You really do need the right people, and those people are super special. Like, you cannot let them go. And I see circumstances where like companies will let someone go for little to nothing on the sales side. And it leads me to believe, like, was that person in the right place in the first place? Like, I've seen AEs that had territories of like Columbus and Tennessee or something like that, getting ousted because they couldn't make something of their territory in the 6 months that the company wanted. And I'm thinking, like, you're not even giving them a chance, though. Like, some territories are just going to be more challenging than others. Like, that's just the way it shakes out.
Sometimes it's really territory and timing. And I'm just glad on this path that if you get a seat at the table, you have the chance for great years. You might have some droughts, but man, is it great to get your insight, having gone from, again, 100,000 cold calls, that's nuts, to a seasoned sales leader. And we're getting some comments in here like, thank you for this, Josh. Your answers are surgical. And we got a comment from Mia as well. She has a question. Now, I want to know some lessons learned after 100,000 cold calls on cold calling, but I'm going to put a pin in it. We'll get to it later, because cool. Mia does have a question. She's a new account executive, and she's wondering, what's the best way to learn the pitch and how to demo, other than reading case studies, practice pitch, etc.? High level advice around pitching and demoing and really the transition to AE role.
Sure. Oh boy, I think I have bad news for you, Mia, because I'm not sure that I'm actually going to answer your question, but the way that I think about like pitching and learning it is actually learning the pain points from your customer beyond just like the pitch and how to do that. I'll give a more specific example. Old company I was at, we had this revenue kickoff where every single salesperson, every single person on the revenue team was given a script to memorize. And we not everyone agreed with this strategy, but we did it anyway. And a couple people kind of read the script on customer calls, and those opportunities went absolutely nowhere. It was all about like pitching and like really understanding the pitch. And ultimately it didn't get us anywhere. What got us places in our deals was understanding what our customers were actually trying to solve for beyond just like a feature or beyond just our product. Again, it kind of goes back to what is the broader strategy of this company. I'll be more specific. A customer came to us and said, "Hey, we're interested in looking at your software." Cool. Like, you can pitch, you can do the demo, you can give case studies. Instead, what we did was we read a few articles about this company and we realized, okay, they're in the retail e-commerce space. And one of their main goals is getting to profitability. They were very close in their most recent earnings report. Their earnings per share was like negative 0.3 cents or something like that. They were like right on the brink. And so one of the things that one of the questions that the rep asked on this deal was, what's important to you and why is it important to you? And when does this need to be true by? And what our customer said was, we're driving towards profitability. We need to cut our costs and we need to increase, the return on this campaign. So we were able to go through the process, understanding the broader strategy that we needed to not only meet, but be a part of. And we were able to help them pull that strategy together 2 quarters after they became a customer. They were profitable. Again, we weren't the only reason why. It's an entire company that's going to kind of like take that effort. But ultimately, we were able to connect our platform with their strategy and goals and help them achieve it through the commercial terms that we set. And because we were experts in what they were looking to do, and we had a deep understanding of what their internal goals were, we were able to win what ended up being a 6 or 7 figure deal. I think ultimately it became a 7-figure deal. And so I would actually, to like try to summarize all of that, Mia, the way that I would think about that is like learning the pitches is important. Learning case studies is important. What I would say is actually even more important is understanding the challenges that you are solving for your customers on a day-to-day basis, and then back into your pitch and case studies from there. Because ultimately, if you put the customer at the center and then move back, I think you're going to actually have more success in selling consistently, as opposed to like trying to regurgitate a set pitch. I know I didn't necessarily answer your question, but that's what's worked for our teams. It's worked for me.
You just hit it out of the park. It might have been a grand slam using a baseball metaphor, back to your Mets days. Personally, I feel like you crushed that answer. It is really about shifting off ourselves, focusing on the customer, and getting strategic. What are their business drivers? What are they trying to achieve? And you're aligning how your solution can contribute to where they're trying to go, and really focusing on becoming an expert on the problems in your customer's world. So I don't know. I couldn't have put it any better. And Mia, if you have follow-up questions, feel free to throw it in the chat. And guys, don't be shy. This is a unique opportunity to be live with Josh to get some actual coaching and training here. But in the meantime, I'm going to take it in the direction that I wanted to, Josh. You made 100,000 cold calls. That is no joke. Cold calling is something everyone wants to know about. I notice on YouTube, it's commonly searched. It's obviously highly effective if you can get someone on the phone and can be impactful in your communication. What are some of the high-level lessons that you learned after 100,000 cold calls and what it takes to be successful as a cold caller?
I think, first of all, planning for your day. The biggest thing that I did that was successful was at the end of each day, I would plan out, 40 to 60 calls that I would make the next day at minimum. And then I would time block and know that at a certain point in the day, which for me was 10:30 in the morning every single day, I needed to be at the bare minimum at 50 to 60 calls if I was going to hit, 100, 120 every single day. That's, I think, number one. Number two is focusing on the why. That's a lot of calls that you are making in one day. It is incredibly hard to keep a high standard when you are making all of those calls. Now, I'm not sure in 2024 that I'd be recommending that people make 120 cold calls a day, because that was a lot. And I would go home just absolutely exhausted at the end of each day. So, and it's also just it's a different time now. Like people are not converting at the same level that they were 10, 11 years ago when I was making cold calls. So I think you used the word surgical earlier. be surgical with your calls, focus on the right accounts and why you are calling in specifically, have an understanding of the strategy and the approach. And I'll use the quote earlier, like don't give up, right? A rock, water cuts through rock with its persistence, not its power. Be pleasantly persistent. Like if you
Mhm.
have conviction around that account or that person getting value from what you are selling, you can't give up. You have to keep trying and be pleasant, right? Like don't try to like kick through the front door, but don't give up, because if you do, all of that knowledge that you have built up is going to be for naught. So for me, I would continue to call, and any no is just a no for now.
That's so funny because of all things, I was with my therapist today. I really believe in, being proactive to care for our mental and emotional health, right? It's something that is important to me. And my therapist literally said, it's like, you only see no as a not now. Like, I don't know. And today's session was really almost celebratory. And that's how it is sometimes, where it's like, life is good and I'm grinding. I got a great interview coming up with Josh. I'm pumped. But it's funny you mentioned that, because that's how I am. And I've come to see that a no really is a not now. And when you get a no, like, and it's a good no, like they have like legitimate reasons, maybe they're locked in a contract or things like that. Do you have any thoughts on how to tactfully plant a seed to keep an open line of communication and follow up? Like, what are your thoughts on when you do get those like legit no's?
Yeah, I mean, I first of all, I like to poke around. I'll ask like I think a lot of people say like, can I give you a call at a certain point, or can I give you a call in 6 months? I know that I can give them a call in 6 months. I don't need to ask that. What I want to know is, if I call in 6 months, is that call going to be valuable to them? Are they going to want to take the call? And if so, what's going to change between now and then that is going to make a call and is going to make an outreach worthwhile? Because a lot of people just want to be nice, right? Like they don't want conflict. If you're calling them, they don't really want to talk to you. Like, oh yeah, call me in 6 months. Like, no, like, why would I do that? Like, I'll call you if it makes sense, but tell me what's going to change between now and then that's actually going to make it worthwhile for you. I want to seek to understand that piece. And I think ultimately it just is going to depend on what you're being told. So I'll give you two quick stories. One, I made a cold call back in 2014. Person picks up the phone and says, "Why the F would I ever buy from you?"
Immediately?
Immediately is the first
Yeah.
thing he ever said. He ended up purchasing the largest deal in Mets history at the time.
Oh my gosh.
And the way that I was able to get around it was like, I kind of laughed at his response. I was like, oh dang, like you definitely have some feelings. Like, did the Mets hurt you? Like what happened here? And like, just gave him like a couple of minutes to vent. And he was like, I'm not going to buy until I get value. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. Like, I asked him, like, what does value look like to you? Like, what can I do to help? And he was like, invite me to cool stuff. Okay. So we would have cool events, a talk with a former player, batting practice with current players. And just like, it wasn't consistent, but once every 2 to 3 months, I'd hit him up and I'd say, hey, Mark, like, you want to come to this? And, even he wasn't able to come to all of them, but when he was able to come, he was very appreciative, and he was appreciative of the invites, and just slowly we kind of chipped away at what was maybe a bias on his part. I think a reasonable bias, but still a bias. And then eventually he felt like, hey, like there might be something here. We went through a little value analysis. He ended up buying a fairly substantial package. And then I'll give you another example. Gentleman picks up the phone. This was much more recent. This was when I was at WalkMe. Gentleman picks up the phone. How'd you get my number? Why are you calling me? Take me off your list. We ended up having a 20-minute conversation because I kind of just shared with them, oh, hey, like, here's how I got your number. There are these companies that actually sell your data. So, they actually scrape the internet. Here's what happens.
Yeah.
Like, do you want me to take you off the list? I can certainly put you on a do not call list. And instead he was just like, well, like, why are you calling me? Like, okay. So now we go into that. And again, it's just like, I'm not actually trying to sell. What I'm trying to do is just see if there might be a fit. And I'm not going to be offended as to whether someone's going to like say yes or no, because as you called out, like, I've made so many cold calls in my career that like I've heard some pretty genuinely horrible things. And at this point, like, nothing is going to get to me. It's just going to roll right off the back. And if you think that this could be a fit and it's worth a little bit more time, great, we'll put time on the calendar. If you don't, but you think it might be in 6 months, fine. We'll circle back if you can give me a good reason why. And if you think that like this is never something that you're ever gonna touch, well, then I'm gonna call your manager.
Man, what great examples. And it's really your intention that you're coming in seeking to understand if there even is a fit. You're not assuming, and you're unattached to the outcome. And you're not taking rejection or being told off personally. Like you said, it's just water off your back, I think you might have said. So that mindset is something that is helpful for us to capture and take on ourselves. And the only other thing I wanted to ask you about cold calling, because I do want to get to some other things like increasing close rates. I saw you had a great post and a few other things. Is do you want to riff at all or have any thoughts on like a cold call script? I call it a flow, of like how you might start the beginning of a cold call, peak interest, share value, maybe close. If you want, it'd be helpful to get at least your high level thinking on a flow.
Yeah, I when I started my career, I had an exact script on the left of my little cubicle. It was tacked up, and I would make cold calls at an angle so that I could read. And it worked for a little bit, right? I mean, I was 22, 23, like I didn't really know what I was doing. And eventually I just kind of started to like go on my own and do my own thing. And I think ultimately you got to do what works for you and what feels most natural. For me, what that is just starting off with honesty, like, hey, Chris, you're not expecting my call. Do you have, a minute for me to explain to you why I'm calling? And if not, I'll leave you alone. I kind of like to start with something like that.
I love that. And I love your tone. It just puts me at ease.
Yeah. It's
a real human being.
Yeah, I try to be super upfront. If the answer is no, fine. If the answer is yes, fine. And if the answer is yes, I like to specifically share something unique about them or about their company. For example, like one of the scripts I used for many years was, we work with XYZ company. They're using us for this. There's a few similarities to you in this way and in that way. I thought maybe you might be interested to see how they're using us and see if that might work for you. That was one script that I liked because I liked going with the similarities. The one that I've been a little bit more partial to recently, and this is generally for companies that are either public or like they have some recent news where, it's something to the tune of like, hey, Chris, I read X in your 10Q that came out a month ago. It seemed like maybe you're looking to cut costs or consolidate your software spend. I think that this might specifically be helpful for you. Is this worth a discussion? Like, am I barking up the right tree here? I really like that. Like, am I barking up the right tree? I also like saying things like, hey, am I totally off base? Because generally people are more willing to correct you if you are overly confident. Whereas if you come in with actually kind of that negative, like, hey, Chris, am I just like totally off base here? People like to make you feel better, like, oh, no, like you're fine, you're not off base. And then they'll actually like give you more information of like yes, like to an extent, but like that's not my department, that's this other department. And you can actually just get information by just shutting up and letting them talk. And so I kind of like to approach in that way of, if you go back to the old saying, if you ask for money, you'll get advice. And if you ask for advice, you'll get money. I like to frame it as if I'm asking for advice, like, hey, Chris, like, I don't really know much about your company, but hey, like, here's what I read in the 10Q. Am I barking up the right tree? Am I totally off base here? And generally people will actually tell you if you're off base or if you're barking up the right tree, and then they'll actually go further and tell you why.
If you get, I'm not interested, you kind of already hit on objection handling with that one example, like why the F would I, buy from you? But if you get some common ones, like we have another vendor, I'm not interested, just any other final thoughts on how you might approach like seeking to understand objections, or I'm going to use the term handling because everyone says objection handling, but we know that's kind of rough phraseology and probably not the best. People don't want to be handled, but
I get where you're coming from. Part of it is like, I actually just want to listen for the tone. If people seem rushed and like they don't really want to be spoken to, I actually will just hang up and call someone else because I don't know how much I'm really going to get out of it. And I also don't want people to feel like, oh God, like that's that person who like wouldn't let me off the phone the last time. Like, if someone's going to say no, someone else is going to say yes. And for me, I'm a believer that every no leads to a yes. So I'm not typically someone that's going to kind of like twist a wrist and like try to stay on the phone. I'll just call someone else. But when the tone is maybe a little bit more confident in their answer, maybe they're not as rushed, I will seek to understand. And one of the things I'll ask is like, oh, okay, like what are you not interested in? Or, oh, cool, like you're using a vendor, like who are you using? What I found is oftentimes if it's about a current vendor or potentially a competitor, I've actually found that a lot of times the competitor or the vendors may be adjacent but not a direct competitor, in which case like I want to understand why they think they don't need it, or like what's going so well for them, so that I can understand just for myself, let alone like, more calls, but I just want to understand for myself, like, where did I go wrong in my prospecting and what should I be looking out for in the future? So one of the things I'll ask is like, hey, I really appreciate that. Just for my own sake, like, would you mind telling me where you think you're okay, so that I can actually like avoid calling you or avoid calling other people that might be in the same situation as you. So I actually just try to use it as a learning opportunity so that I can hone my prospecting a little bit and make better recommendations and focus on the right accounts, because I'm less concerned about one no. Like everybody gets no's every single day in sales. I don't care about that. What I'm more focused on is like, crap, am I going after the wrong industry? Am I going after the wrong segment? Am I going after the wrong persona? And if so, why? And what are some flags I can find in the future so that I can make my prospecting more efficient?
So you've got an abundance mindset, reminds me of Jay-Z, on to the next one. So you don't get too caught up on any single rejection. And second of all, you see learning opportunities at minimum. You're going to gain some insight that you can take into future conversations. So what a great mindset to have, something that we can borrow ourselves, as well as some of your phraseology. I just like love your tone and how you put these things. So I think, with cold calling, I mean, shoot, why not just talk about, the final piece of the pie, which is setting the meeting. And then I want to talk about how you ended up helping these SDRs get promoted. I know noticed you helped a lot of them grow in their career and some of the keys there, but any thoughts on how you would actually, tactically set the meeting?
I mean, yeah, first and foremost, like you got to ask for it, right? If the call's going well and you feel like they're kind of picking up what you're putting down, like ask for it. Don't be afraid, ask. Because if the worst case scenario they say no, you're going to know why, and you're going to be able to again like work on some objection handling. Secondly, do your best to set it close to your cold call. The best thing that you can do is set that meeting for the very next day. Why? Because you've built a lot of really good momentum. And the faster they can come and check out your solution, the better they're going to remember it. I think a lot of times people and salespeople will think like, oh, I don't want to bother them. Let me set the call for next week. But then next week rolls around and that momentum's gone, right? Your customer may not remember the cold call. They may not remember why they actually like put time on the calendar. And you want them to remember who you are and why you're awesome and what was interesting about it. So you're doing your best to ask for that meeting the next day. Not only is that not going to bother your customer, if they're legitimately interested, they're going to want that meeting sooner than later. That's number one. Number two, make sure that you're prepared. And this sounds silly, but like it's the basic stuff, right? Like have the calendars up. Make sure that you can quickly make sure that if you need a solutions engineer or a sales engineer on the call, that they're available. Make sure that your account executive is available. I think there just a lot of basics, and it might sound like box checking, but you'd be surprised how many salespeople will just not have their calendar up, and then they're like scrambling to try to do that, and then you have your prospective customer wondering like, do they have their SHIT together? And you just don't want that, right? Go to the call prepared.
Make sure all calendars are accounted for. So you don't run into any gotchas where, oh shoot, like you double booked me with another customer meeting.
Bingo.
And also set the meeting closer, like to the actual call. The sooner, the better. And then you'll really qualify too at how interested someone actually is. So
Exactly.
we can close the books on cold calling. Thank you for putting on a little mini clinic on cold calling for us. Super helpful. Now, I want to understand just some of the high level things that help some of the SDRs that you worked with get promoted. Because a lot of the audience, they might be SDRs. They want to get promoted to AE, and you've helped mentor quite a few. So what are some of the key ingredients to moving from SDR to AE?
Sure. So I think let's split this out. from things SDRs can do to things managers can do.
Okay.
From an SDR perspective, I think first and foremost, and it probably goes without saying, is just performance, right? You got to perform. Secondly, have a mastery of your skills, meaning that you should be able to do that BDR job and hit your numbers in 5 hours or 4 hours as opposed to the full 8 hours. The reason I say that is the expectation of generating pipeline doesn't leave at the AE. In fact, there are going to be more demands on you to generate that pipeline in key accounts.
You're right.
So being able to do that in a condensed timeline is really important. Like one of the things I actually listen for BDRs is like, hey, like I can do this job with my eyes closed. Like I only need 5 hours of work every single day to hit my number. For me, that's a plus, not a minus. I'm not concerned about their work ethic. I'm concerned that if I put them in an AE role, that they're going to forget that they still have all of those same pipeline generation roles. As an AE, your role expands. It does not contract. So I think that that's two things. And then number three, are you buddies with multiple people? And what I mean by that is, as a BDR, SDR, have you picked an AE to be your buddy? Are you learning from someone? Do you have a mentor? And then similarly, are you also helping a newer BDR or maybe a struggling BDR get better? Are you teaching them the craft? Are you able to communicate that clearly? And then from a manager perspective and a company perspective, process. You need to give people a process in order to be promoted. So one of the things that we did really well at WalkMe is we had a BDR to AE certification where BDRs would go through 4 stages of this certification. And a certification doesn't promise a promotion, right? Unfortunately, as much as we would all love to, you can never promise promotions, but it certifies that SDR BDR is ready for promotion. And that's a lot of extra work for BDRs, right? They're going to learn how to be AEs. They're going to learn give gets, negotiation, discovery, a number of very key skills. And then we go into do some role playing. And I think sometimes BDR promotions can be, I don't know if arbitrary is the right word, but it lacks process. And ultimately, if you have a process and you've done the right kind of road showing to the AE leaders, then what will end up happening is when a job is available, when an AE role is available, those AE leaders are going to think first about the BDRs, and then they're going to start to think about external hires. And, for me, like when I promote BDRs, I love doing that because it's actually helpful for the organization. BDRs have institutional knowledge. The ramp is faster. They know the product. They know the accounts. It's a much more seamless transition to promote SDRs into an AE role. And that's typically my preference, is to do that. So I think from a manager and company perspective, give that process to those SDRs in order to enable them to gain that promotion.
And I want to encourage the aspiring SDRs out there who are looking to break into tech sales at a great company to really be mindful when you evaluate a company to look for leaders like Josh, right? And maybe you can do that by talking to individuals at the organization, SDRs and AEs, to get their perspective on the leadership and ask questions in your interviews to validate what type of learning and development is offered at the organization. Because Josh, it would be a dream to work for a leader like yourself who wants people to be successful, provides a path and that enablement. So I think that's actually a key nugget for folks as they look to navigate for their first SDR role.
I appreciate that. I think that a big key that you just said is ask questions, because as much as I love promoting SDRs, I also have been in a circumstance where the surrounding just challenges at the company didn't necessarily enable me to promote SDRs.
Okay.
I was actually kind of like forced to hire from the outside as much as I didn't want to. We had like $1 million quotas for like SMB AEs. And that's one of the things where it kind of killed me. So I was like, dang, like we're basically losing this promotion process. And so as much as I would want to promote an SDR, I haven't throughout my entire career always been able to do that. And so I think that what you just said is such a big key, is regardless of how great a leader looks on LinkedIn, and as much as I champion this on LinkedIn, ask the questions, because sometimes not in a circumstance to be able to do that as much as it would, that kind of killed me when I was in that circumstance.
You know what? That's a great point. Then you might have the leader who is all about that, but there could be broader circumstances with the company. So that just it means we have to do a little more due diligence. And so appreciate you giving us that empathy. Now I noticed we have about 5 minutes. This conversation has been power packed. I'm going to rewatch the game tape and take some notes. It's been amazing. I wanted to finish up talking about your deal checklist that you implemented that I think it doubled win rates at your organization. And I was looking at you were at WalkMe and you guys IPO'd and you started SDR Defenders and sold it off. And I was looking at your experience. There was Presidio. There was quite a few great organizations. What organization, real quick, was when you put together that deal checklist?
That was a Lob.
Oh, okay. At Lob,
Yeah.
And Lob hit 100 million. Yeah, that's exciting. So I just wanted to walk through the deal checklist because it sounds like it doubled win rates. And there's 4 key aspects based on my notes. And the first is next steps on the calendar. And I just, well, you know what, Josh, maybe I could run through all 4.
Go. You've clearly done your homework. I love it. You got me.
Let's go through all 4. I realize, just for the sake of the audience to get the full picture, and then we'll double click on each one. So guys, this is a deal checklist that could help, double your win rates as an AE. So number 1 is next steps on the calendar. Number 2, multi-threaded. Number 3, text-based relationship with your champion. And number 4, a value analysis. So let's dig into the first one. Tell us what you mean by next steps on the calendar. And I mean, that's kind of straightforward, but still.
No, you're exactly right. Does the deal have momentum is what that's measuring, right? Is the customer interested enough to book a next meeting on the calendar while you are, in that other meeting? Or if they didn't on that meeting, did they do it shortly after? Is this top of mind for them?
Okay, perfect. Now, the next one is, are you multi-threaded? Tell us about what that means.
Yeah. When Lob hired our former CRO, Corey Hogan, one of his isms that he said is, if you're single threaded, you're dead. And I don't think there's a better way to say it than that. If you're single threaded, that means that you're not talking to all of the right people. You're siloed. And in order to make sure that you're able to actually sell this deal, you really do need to be talking to the people that are going to sign the contract, that are actually holding the budget, the people that are going to be the users of the product, the people that are going to implement. Realistically, there's actually a post from someone at Clary. I don't know if it was Andy Byrne, the CEO, but someone had said at some point that there was more people in the room when they were deciding on a software purchase than in their most recent fundraise. And to me, that was mind-blowing because it shows just how critical being multi-threaded is. You could be talking to 2 people, but you need to be talking to 30, right? And so being multi-threaded is really just the very basics, right? Of if you are going to sell this deal, you've got to be talking to more than one person. And who are those people? Now, just because that box is checked doesn't mean that you're talking to all the right people, but at least it means you have a couple of different people to help you speak with all of the relevant stakeholders.
It's funny because going back to that key account director on Uber at Google Cloud, when I was interviewing from the inside sales to field sales role, I asked her, what's your, as I said, secret sauce, or what does it take to succeed at your level? And she mentioned being a chameleon, which you already talked about, mirroring and matching. And she also mentioned spreading your tentacles, going wide and deep in accounts, exactly what you're saying, multi-threading. So let's go to number 3 on the deal checklist, having a text-based relationship with your executive. Tell us what that's about and maybe how you get there.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, everybody, in business is going to talk through the phone and email. Right? That doesn't make you special. What makes you special is to be communicating in the same way that that person communicates with their family and friends, right? If you just pop, this is a little exercise, right? Pop open your messages and just scroll down and just see who you're talking to, right? It's probably your husband or wife and your parents, your kids, right? Your siblings, your friends. That's who's in there. And so if you're able to be on a text-based relationship with your customer, that means that you've reached a level of comfortability and typically honesty with your customer, that they trust you to use their phone wisely, right? You're not just going to blow them up trying to sell them a deal. So to me, that is a critical component of the deal because it measures the strength of your relationship with your champion.
And the final aspect of the deal checklist is having a value analysis. And maybe I might have one more question for you after this, but we could almost wrap up by talking about what is this value analysis all about? What does it look like?
Yeah, ultimately, a value analysis should be measuring the financial impact of a partnership or a deal. And an important component of that, and really the most important, is having it be co-built. You can go to most SaaS companies' websites now and see some form of like an ROI calculator. That's not what this should be. A value analysis should be taking an understanding and taking stock of the entire breadth of the agreement that you've gotten through a deep level of discovery. And the value analysis should be iterative. This should be something where each new piece of information is likely either going to drive this deal forward and is going to increase the value that your customer will receive, or it won't. And either way, that should be measured, typically in a metric that your customers are using. So at Lob, we were using ROMI, return on marketing investment, ROAS, which is return on ad spend, or just a general ROI, again, depending on the metric that your customer is measuring. And a lot of that value analysis should be metrics that your customer is giving you. This should be ultimately like a co-built value analysis that shows the financial impact of the deal. And it's really important that it's co-built because ultimately your buyer, your champion, they're going to have to take this to their CFO, right? And they're going to have to make the business case of why this is an important purchase and the strategy around it. And you can't have that CFO questioning the financial impact. Ultimately, where you want to get to is you want that CFO to say something to the tune of like, yeah, this is directionally correct. It's never going to be perfect because, of course, it's measuring the potential impact. That the relationship hasn't started yet, right? So after the deal is signed, then you want to pass that from pre-sales to post-sales. And then that iterative kind of hypothesis value analysis becomes a measured and specific value analysis of what value the customer is actually getting now that the deal has been signed. So it's something that should really be in use throughout the entire relationship. And it should start in the pre-sales process.
Well, I just did a quick mental value analysis of this conversation, and it's priceless because it's going to help a bunch of aspiring SDRs, and AEs catalyze their career, make a lot more money to create more freedom and impact in their life. So seriously, thank you so much for joining. And I just want to wrap up with some calls to action. I encourage y'all out there to connect with Josh Roth on LinkedIn. Don't be shy. Now, if you send him a question, make it pointed. I noticed that on your profile. Is there anything other ways that we can engage with you? Because I know Kyle's got a course, and I don't even know if you do like have a course or any types of things. But I just wanted to check on any other calls to action other than just connecting with you.
I appreciate it. None else. I don't have a course. Just connect with me. I enjoy just kind of like shooting the breeze with people and talking sales. I enjoy nerding out on this stuff, and just appreciate anybody that wants to chat, and appreciate you, Chris, for a great conversation, and you certainly did your homework on this one.
Yeah, thank you for the time. And do you have any final maybe challenge to the audience? And it could extend to the sales world or even just reaching their potential in life. Take it away. Any final challenge?
Final challenge. That's interesting. Find something you're passionate about and do it. Not every job will be the right job for you forever. Understand when it is the right job, when it isn't the right job, and get ahead of it. And, do something with people that you love.
Find something you're passionate about and do something with people you love. Amazing advice. Guys, thank you for showing up to the live audience who's brought some questions, and thank you for your time and attention. And to those folks who will watch this video and this conversation as it floats out in the YouTube sea. To your success in tech sales and in life, happy selling and happy living, and we'll see you in the next one. Josh, thanks so much.